There is a truth about forgiveness that many overlook, for it is often veiled behind our misconceptions and fears. You see, we think of forgiveness as a gift given solely to the one who has wronged us, an act of kindness, a gracious gesture. But what if I told you that forgiveness is not merely for the sake of the one who has caused harm, but a profound act of liberation for yourself? Forgiveness is not weakness. In a world where strength is often measured by power, authority, or the ability to defend oneself, the notion that forgiveness could be a form of strength seems counterintuitive. And yet, we see examples scattered across history, literature, and even in our daily lives that suggest forgiveness is a higher form of strength than the more obvious manifestations of toughness. We are taught from an early age that to forgive is to let go, to release, and to yield in some way to the wrongdoer. Yet what is often overlooked is the quiet, profound strength it takes to forgive, not just for the sake of others, but for our own inner peace and well-being. In our modern world, we are conditioned to equate forgiveness with vulnerability. To forgive, we are told, is to expose ourselves to the possibility of being hurt again. We wonder, if we forgive, does that mean we are somehow accepting or excusing the wrongdoing? If we forgive, are we not permitting further harm to be done? In this view, forgiveness is mistakenly seen as a surrender, a relinquishing of control or authority, as if letting go of anger means allowing others to continue hurting us. And so we resist it, holding on to grudges as if our very strength lies in our ability to remember every slight, every transgression, as a form of protection against future harm. But this perspective on forgiveness is based on a misunderstanding of what true strength is. True strength does not lie in holding on to anger, bitterness, or resentment. In fact, these feelings over time only weaken us. Anger can corrode the soul, bitterness clouds our judgment, and resentment imprisons us in a perpetual state of pain. It consumes our energy and robs us of peace. Clinging to past wrongs is not an act of strength. It is an act of self-inflicted harm, an ongoing battle with ghosts of the past. Forgiveness, then, is not an act of yielding in the sense of giving up our power. It is an act of reclaiming it. It is an act of rising above the hurt that has been inflicted upon us and choosing not to let that hurt define us. It is the decision to take control of our own inner lives, to refuse to let another person's actions dictate our emotional state. The one who forgives is the one who is free. The one who refuses to forgive is the one who remains shackled, bound to a past they cannot change, trapped in a cycle of pain. Consider for a moment the immense strength it takes to forgive someone who has wronged you deeply. It is easy to fight back, to retaliate, to seek revenge or some form of payback. This is the instinctual response of the wounded heart, the desire to get even in order to restore some balance or justice. But true strength is not in perpetuating harm, even if that harm is disguised as justice or retribution. True strength is in the ability to rise above the situation and choose a path of peace. It takes far more courage to forgive someone who has betrayed, hurt, or wronged you than it does to retaliate. It takes a depth of emotional resilience and wisdom to look past the wrong, not to deny it or justify it, but to understand that holding on to it will only continue the cycle of suffering. Forgiveness does not mean that we condone the wrongdoing, nor does it imply that we are indifferent to it. On the contrary, forgiveness acknowledges the pain that has been inflicted. It is not about pretending the harm didn't happen or that it was inconsequential. To forgive is to confront the injury head-on, to face the hurt with courage, and then to choose to release the grip it has over our lives. It is, in essence, an act of reclaiming our own emotional freedom. In this sense, forgiveness is not an escape from reality. It is a brave confrontation with it. The strength required for forgiveness is also evident in the fact that it often demands the release of our own need for control. When we hold on to grudges or resentments, we believe at some level that by holding on, we are somehow exercising power. We may think that by remaining angry, we are forcing the other person to pay for their wrongs, or that by refusing to forgive, we are imposing some sort of justice. But in reality, it is we who are shackled by these feelings. The one who has wronged us may have long since moved on, unaware of the lingering pain they have caused, while we remain trapped in the past, allowing their actions to continue influencing our present. Forgiveness, therefore, requires an immense strength of will. It requires the ability to let go of control, to relinquish the need to dictate the outcome of another person's actions. In forgiving, we are choosing to step away from the need for retribution or vengeance. We are choosing to put down the burden of anger, no matter how righteous it may feel, and to trust that by releasing it, we are making a conscious decision to move forward. It is this act of relinquishing control that ultimately empowers us. We no longer allow the wrongdoer's actions to dictate our emotional landscape. Instead, we take responsibility for our own feelings, choosing to cultivate peace within ourselves. In a sense, forgiveness is the highest form of strength, because it requires us to confront our own vulnerabilities. It requires us to admit that we are not invincible, that we are capable of being hurt. But it also requires us to recognize that the only way to heal from that hurt is not by clinging to it, but by releasing it. It requires us to acknowledge the pain, but to choose not to let it consume us. To forgive is to exercise an unparalleled inner fortitude, for it takes far more strength to let go of a wound than it does to nurse it. Thus, forgiveness is not about making ourselves weaker, but about making ourselves stronger. It is about transcending the impulse to cling to past wrongs, to live in the shadow of resentment, and to instead choose a higher path, one of peace, freedom, and self-mastery. In this way, forgiveness is not a passive act of submission. It is an active decision to reclaim control over our own hearts, to refuse to be governed by bitterness or anger. The one who forgives is the one who is truly free, for they have chosen to rise above the harm that has been done to them and to move forward with grace. True forgiveness liberates the forgiver in ways that are often overlooked. When we forgive, we might think that we are granting something to the person who has wronged us, some kind of release or absolution from their actions. However, the deeper truth is that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. It is an act of reclaiming power, of breaking free from the chains that hold us to the past, and of choosing peace over pain. In this way, forgiveness is not about excusing or minimizing the wrongdoing. It is about breaking the cycle of suffering and liberating ourselves from the weight of resentment and anger. At first glance, it may seem as though forgiving someone means that we are letting them off the hook, allowing their harmful actions to go unpunished. It might feel as though, by forgiving, we are giving the other person an undeserved pass. This misunderstanding is what often keeps us from embracing the full power of forgiveness. In reality, forgiveness does not erase the harm done to us, nor does it remove the need for accountability. It does not mean that the wrongdoer should not face consequences for their actions. It simply means that we choose not to let the wrong continue to control us. By holding on to anger and resentment, we give the person who hurt us far more power than they deserve. Every time we revisit the hurt, we give that person a small piece of our emotional energy. We relive the pain, keep it alive in our minds, and allow it to dictate how we feel in the present. The wrongdoer may have already moved on, or perhaps they don't even know the depth of the hurt they caused. The more we cling to the anger, the more it eats away at us, leaving us in a state of perpetual distress. It is a cruel irony. The one who wronged us may have already moved on, but we remain stuck, held captive by our own emotions. Forgiveness breaks this cycle. It is the key that unlocks the door to freedom. When we forgive, we choose to release the hold that the past has on us. We choose not to allow the actions of others to determine the quality of our present or our future. Forgiveness allows us to step out of the prison we have created for ourselves, to stop letting the wrongs of others define our emotional state, and to reclaim our peace. This is not an easy thing to do. It requires courage, vulnerability, and a willingness to confront the pain head-on. But when we do, we find that forgiveness frees us in ways we never thought possible. Forgiveness is not a passive act, but an active choice. It does not happen automatically, nor does it come quickly. It is a decision we make again and again over time as we process the hurt and come to terms with what has happened. It is a process of healing, and it requires patience and self-compassion. The more we practice forgiveness, the more we release the hold that anger and resentment have over us. And the more we practice, the easier it becomes to forgive, not just others, but ourselves as well. The act of forgiving, at its core, is an act of self-love. When we forgive, we are choosing to stop the cycle of suffering, to stop punishing ourselves for something that happened in the past. We are choosing to honor our own well-being, to stop giving the past so much control over our present. The more we forgive, the more we begin to see that our peace, our happiness, and our emotional health are not dependent on the actions of others, but on our own decision. In choosing forgiveness, we are choosing to prioritize our own healing, and in doing so, we are liberated from the weight of anger and pain. Ultimately, forgiveness is about reclaiming our own emotional sovereignty. It is the realization that we do not need to carry the burdens of the past any longer. When we forgive, we do not give away our power, we take it back. The person who has wronged us may not change or even recognize the harm they've caused, but in forgiving them, we free ourselves from the grip of their actions. We release ourselves from the emotional chains they have imposed upon us, and we become the masters of our own hearts. Forgiveness, then, is a powerful act of liberation, one that empowers us to live in the present, unburdened by the past. Forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling. This is a concept that challenges much of what we are taught about emotions and responses. Often, we wait for the right feeling to arise before we act. We think that forgiveness will come naturally, that one day we will suddenly feel ready to let go of our anger, resentment, or hurt. But this is a misunderstanding of what forgiveness truly requires. Forgiveness is not about waiting for an emotion to guide us. It is about making a decision, a conscious, deliberate choice to let go of the pain and to stop allowing it to control our lives. When we think of forgiveness as a feeling, we place the power of our healing in the hands of our emotions. Emotions are fleeting, unpredictable, and often influenced by our circumstances. If we wait for the moment when we feel like forgiving, we may find that it never comes. Anger, pain, and hurt do not simply vanish on their own. They linger, often becoming more entrenched the longer we allow them to take root. This is why forgiveness cannot be a matter of waiting for the right moment or hoping that the emotions will resolve themselves. True forgiveness requires us to take responsibility for our emotional state and make a choice that transcends how we feel in the moment. One of the greatest obstacles to forgiveness is the belief that we must feel ready to forgive. We tell ourselves, when I feel like I can forgive, I will. But what often happens is that we never feel ready. The anger still rises, the bitterness remains, and the desire for revenge may seem overwhelming. These feelings do not simply disappear, no matter how much time passes. If we wait for the feeling of forgiveness to magically appear, we could spend years, even a lifetime, trapped in the cycle of resentment. Forgiveness, therefore, cannot be driven by our emotions. It must come from our will. The choice to forgive is not about denying our feelings or pretending that the pain isn't real. It is not about ignoring the depth of the hurt or minimizing the harm that has been done to us. On the contrary, forgiveness is an acknowledgement of the pain. It is a decision to not allow that pain to rule over us, to not let it define our present or our future. We do not forgive because we feel like it. We forgive because we choose to stop holding on to the emotional weight that the hurt has placed on our hearts. Forgiveness is a conscious decision to step away from the emotional power the wrongdoer has over us. For many, the act of forgiveness feels counterintuitive. It seems unnatural to forgive someone who has caused us deep harm, especially when we feel justified in our anger. There is a sense of self-righteousness that comes with holding on to resentment. We feel that by holding on to our anger, we are somehow protecting ourselves or asserting our dignity. But this is an illusion. The more we hold on to our anger, the more we allow it to control us. We think we are keeping the wrongdoer in check, but in reality, we are keeping ourselves in prison. Every time we revisit the hurt, every time we relive the betrayal, we are giving away more of our emotional energy to the very person who hurt us. We are letting them dictate our mood, our actions, and our peace of mind. By choosing forgiveness, we stop this cycle. We take back control of our emotional state. Forgiveness is not about allowing ourselves to be weak or passive. It is not about being a doormat or pretending that the harm was insignificant. Forgiveness is a form of strength because it requires us to take control of our inner world, to rise above the pain, and to choose peace in the face of conflict. It is a courageous decision to move forward without the need for retribution or revenge. It is a powerful act of self-liberation. By choosing to forgive, we are not letting the other person off the hook. We are freeing ourselves from the emotional grip that their actions have on us. We are deciding consciously that we will no longer allow the wrong to dictate our emotional life. In the beginning, forgiveness may feel impossible. We may find ourselves caught in the grip of anger, hurt, or disbelief. The pain can seem so raw, so fresh, that we cannot imagine ever feeling differently. But even in those moments, the choice to forgive remains in our hands. It may not come all at once, and it may not come easily, but it is always a decision. Each day we can make the choice to forgive, to release a little bit of the anger or resentment, and to begin to heal. Forgiveness is a process. And like any process, it begins with a single decision. It is important to understand that forgiveness does not mean that the wrong was okay, or that we are excusing harmful behavior. Forgiveness is not about condoning what happened. It is about choosing to move beyond it. It is about refusing to allow the hurt to dictate our emotional state or our future. We may still grieve the harm that was done, but we do not need to carry that grief forever. Forgiveness allows us to release the emotional burden so that we can heal and move on. It allows us to reclaim our emotional freedom, to stop giving power to the past and start living in the present. The choice to forgive also comes with an important understanding. Forgiveness is not always a one-time act. It is a decision we make repeatedly as we continue to process the hurt and allow ourselves the space to heal. There may be moments when old feelings resurface, when the pain feels fresh again, and when we feel like we have not forgiven fully. But in those moments, we have the opportunity to choose forgiveness once more. Each time we make the choice to forgive, we are taking a step closer to healing. Forgiveness, in its essence, is an act of willpower. It is the recognition that we are in control of our own emotions, that we have the ability to choose how we respond to the wrongs done to us. It is about deciding not to be governed by our feelings, but by our determination to move forward with peace, even when our hearts feel heavy, even when the wounds are still raw. We can choose forgiveness, and in that choice, we find the power to heal. Forgiveness is a process, not a one-time event. This understanding is crucial because it allows us to approach forgiveness with the patience and compassion we often need, especially when the hurt we've experienced runs deep. If we believe that forgiveness should happen instantly, or that once we forgive everything should feel perfectly healed, we set ourselves up for frustration and disappointment. The idea that forgiveness is a quick fix, a simple act that can instantly erase the pain and restore peace, is not only unrealistic, it can also be harmful. It places unnecessary pressure on us and prevents us from truly healing. The reality of forgiveness is that it is a journey, one that unfolds over time as we process the hurt, reflect on our emotions, and gradually release the pain we carry. One of the reasons why forgiveness is a process is because we are dealing with real emotional wounds. When we experience betrayal, hurt, or wrongdoing, it often leaves deep scars that cannot be erased by a single decision. The process of forgiving involves acknowledging these wounds, sitting with the pain, and gradually allowing ourselves to heal. It's important to recognize that healing is not linear. There will be moments when we feel like we've made progress, and then there will be moments when the pain feels as fresh as it did on the day it first occurred. For many of us, the first step in the forgiveness process is acknowledging the depth of the hurt. By doing so, we create the space needed for healing to begin. Denying or suppressing our feelings can delay the forgiveness process and keep us trapped in the past. Only by confronting the pain can we start the work of letting it go. As we move through the process of forgiveness, it's important to remember that it is not about forgetting the harm done to us or pretending that it didn't matter. Forgiveness does not erase the past. It does not mean that we should act as though the wrong never happened, or that we should trust the person who hurt us again without any consideration. Forgiveness is not about condoning harmful behavior, but about choosing to release the grip that the hurt has on us. It's about finding the strength to let go of the resentment, anger, or bitterness that we may be holding on to. This release is not an immediate one, but something that takes time. We may need to revisit the decision to forgive multiple times, especially if the pain is deep or if the person who hurt us has not shown remorse or made amends. In the early stages of forgiveness, we might feel resistance. Our minds may tell us that we cannot forgive because the harm was too great, or that forgiving would somehow let the other person off the hook. But as we allow ourselves to sit with the process and reflect on our emotional needs, we begin to understand that forgiveness is something we do for ourselves. Holding on to anger and resentment only keeps us tied to the past and prevents us from moving forward. It is a burden that weighs us down, preventing us from experiencing the peace and freedom that we deserve. Forgiveness also requires us to wrestle with the idea of justice. Many of us want to see wrongdoers held accountable, and we may feel that forgiving someone is akin to letting them escape the consequences of their actions. However, forgiveness does not negate justice. It simply means that we are choosing not to hold on to the anger that is often associated with a desire for retribution. Forgiving someone does not mean that we forgo seeking justice in appropriate ways. We may still need to set boundaries, protect ourselves, or hold others accountable for their actions. But forgiveness is about releasing the emotional charge attached to the wrongdoer, so that we can move forward with peace in our hearts, regardless of what happens externally. The process of forgiveness also involves patience. There may be moments when it feels impossible to forgive, or when we feel like we are not making any progress. But each step we take, no matter how small, is part of the journey. Each time we choose to release a little bit of the hurt or resentment, we are making progress. Sometimes it can help to look back and acknowledge the steps we've already taken, even if it feels like there's still a long way to go. Healing takes time, and it's important to be patient with ourselves as we navigate the forgiveness process. Sometimes forgiveness can feel like a slow unraveling of knots that have been tied tightly for years. It can be uncomfortable, even painful, as we confront the things we've been avoiding. But in that discomfort there is growth. We learn more about ourselves, about our emotional needs, and about the strength we possess to move beyond our pain. The act of forgiving is not about pretending everything is okay before it really is. It's about giving ourselves permission to heal, in trusting that, over time, we will come to a place of peace. Forgiveness, in its truest form, is a continual practice. It's a decision we make, day by day, moment by moment. Each time we are triggered by the past, each time the hurt resurfaces, we have the opportunity to choose forgiveness again. It's not about achieving perfection in our emotional responses, but about committing to the process of healing. The more we practice forgiveness, the easier it becomes to let go of the emotional burdens we've carried, until one day we realize that the weight of resentment has been lifted. But even after we've forgiven,